And welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we dig in deep to analyze the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 1 minute at a time. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, also from the Next Reel.
We're right at the beginning here. We're talking about Jon Favreau's 2008 film, Iron Man, where this whole crazy MCU kicked off. And I should say, we are here with our wonderful guest this week, Ryan Dalton, joining us again. Hello.
Hello. Happy to be here. Happy to nerd out about some comic book movies.
Well, today we are digging into minute 9, which starts with Christine grilling Tony and ends with Christine and Tony on flambe delecto. I know that was terrible. That was just terrible.
No, that was good. You better not cut that. You better. That's so far. It's the highlight of the entire show. I love this minute because it starts with the answer to a big cliffhanger. How do you feel about your other name, Merchant of Death?
That's not bad.
And that cuts at the last minute. And here we get the answer.
Yeah, which is that he just doesn't care what his labels are.
No, he doesn't care. And this is a highlight minute of some really of what we end up getting whenever Tony gets a chance to talk at length, which is just straight up witty repartee.
Well, the progression in this minute is really interesting to me because you get to see more of Tony's mind, which is great, but then you also get to see Christine Everhart being actually a pretty skilled journalist here. And of course she has her own agenda, but I see it in kind of her taking Tony through 3 different stages. He starts out with very polished kind of, suave corporate line guy to getting a little bit more serious to glasses are coming off and now I'm upset at you.
Yes.
And so you see him in 3 different emotional states. And I think that actually attests well to her ability to actually pull that out of him.
Well, and to have him, to sort of watch him through the stages of conflict, right? That when it starts, he is only talking to her because she's attractive and he feels like he doesn't have to bring his A game to the conversation. But it turns out he does have to bring his A game, and we get to watch him make that choice through.
That's a great point.
Downey's performance. Yeah, I think that makes this sequence really fun, and the fact that we get the beginning of the sequence all the way to the end and the payoff in this single minute is really rewarding.
Well, and that's what's so great about this conversation. I mean, while he's going through those transitions over the course of this, I guess you would call it an interview. He never stops with the flirting. It's always there, regardless of which stage he happens to be in their conversation.
Right. He's so
True.
good at it. Have you ever lost a night of sleep? Well, I'd be willing to lose a few with you. And that's at the end of their conversation. It's so good.
Yeah, it speaks well to Tony. And again, it just goes back to this whole playboy status that they had created for the character in the comics and so far in the film. And they have done such a good job of establishing who this character is. And regardless of the save the cat philosophies with screenwriting, we've kind of established that Robert Downey Jr.'s kind of charismatic charm really kind of works to help us get into this character who otherwise is kind of an abysmal person, but he's just so stinking likable in everything that he does. And the way that Robert Downey Jr. plays his kind of his witty repartee as he's talking to, whether it's the soldiers in the Humvee or Christine Everhart, he's really good at just kind of bouncing around within the conversation.
Well, one of the kind of shorthand things you can do from a writing standpoint that I've gone over in writing classes I've taught, I've had taught to me in other classes, is a very quick, effective way to get you to like someone, a character, is to make that character good at something, because we're more likely to buy into that character if we admire something about them, even if there's not a lot to admire about them. If you make them competent and really good at something, then we enjoy watching them or we enjoy reading about them. And here in these early scenes with Tony, we're shown things that he is very good at. He's very good at talking to people. He's very good at being carefree and confident to just about himself and life in general. And so it automatically makes us like watching him.
I love the way you put that too, because, it also gives us a chance to set up a fantastic conflict between sort of id and superego, where Tony is just all id. He's all sort of instinct and, following his gut and following the next thread of the conversation. And just the fact that he is exceptionally good at this sort of banter, and very well equipped to, have this kind of dialogue, because obviously he has the numbers, he has the business behind him to support his perspective. really he wants to get her in bed, and she's coming at this trying to, from all moral, right? She's just trying to get him to come up with a statement on his stance of being evil. And the battle between them is who's going to break, right? Is she going to get his id to actually come into reality, or is he going to get her sort of her superego to hit the sack?
Have you guys seen Leslie Bibb in many other projects that she's done?
A few other things. I remember her from Talladega Nights. Was she one that was on Dawson's Creek, or was that someone else I'm thinking of?
Pete would know that. He was a Dawson's Creek fan.
It's been a long... I was a fan the first couple seasons.
Outing you.
It's been a long time, though.
No, I wear that loud and proud, man. Let's see. What was she? She was just in something that I saw.
She was just in Tag, which we loved.
She was in Tag. She was also in The Babysitter. Did you see that slasher
no.
Netflix
I didn't see that.
gig on? She was... And this is the thing that I remember thinking. She played the mom in The Babysitter, right? And that was a massive context shift for me because I'm, not used to seeing her as the mom, but she was fantastic. She's great.
I feel like I haven't seen her in a lot of things, but every time she pops up in something, I find myself enjoying her. And it's not a big part, this particular reporter, but I feel like she embodies it really well.
Oh yeah, she's good. You can tell from word one that she's a woman on a mission. I think she holds her own in coming back at Tony with a few things that maybe he didn't expect.
Now, I do want to talk to you guys a little bit. Tony mentions that his father helped defeat the Nazis and worked on the Manhattan Project. Now, I had already talked about how in the script it mentioned that Tony was born in 1973. If his father worked on the Manhattan Project, that was like 43 to 42 to 46 is when the Manhattan Project was actively working. I would assume he would be probably in his maybe 30s by the time he was, enough of an engineer and designer to be working on a project like that. Would you guys think?
Well, unless he's as brilliant as Tony was.
Okay,
right?
Sure. Given that, let's say 25 then.
Okay, 20 or 21 when he takes over the reins.
21. Okay, so you're saying 21. He jumps into the Manhattan Project. Okay.
I'm just saying, is there room?
Well, let's go.
We've already talked about how aggressively intelligent and quick-witted Tony is, and we have that typographical error on the Forbes cover when he took over as CEO at 21. Maybe there's a chance that at 21 his dad could have been doing the same stuff.
Okay, let's just take that then and say, let's say that Tony's father started working on the Manhattan Project in 1942 when he was 21. And so
I hear your dubiousness in your voice. You're laying it on pretty thick.
Let's just try it. We'll go through a few different options here and see where we land. So that means he would have been born in 1921 then, right?
Okay.
And so then in 1973, he has Tony, right?
Right.
So that means he's 52, which is doable. He's a 52-year-old man when he has his son, and he dies in 1991. So then 73, 83, 90, so that's 18 years later. So 52, 62. So he's 70 years old when he dies. Okay. We'll see. Now let's just.
I have to say it takes perhaps some aggressive leaps to get us there, but at least that one scenario does check out.
Okay. Now let's say he's 35 when he starts working with the Manhattan Project. This is just we're just playing with the numbers here, trying to guess where he could have been. So that means he would have been born in 1907. And then that means that when Tony was born, he was, what would he have been? 73 minus 7, right? So he would have been 66 years old. So he's a very old father. Very, very old father.
Maybe he was taking some preliminary sips on that super soldier serum. I mean, you never know.
Well, there you go. Right.
That's right. He was dosing. He was the Lance Armstrong of his age.
And that would have put him dying in 91 at 84 years old. And I have a hard time buying that photo that we saw in the news clips when of the newspaper when he died that he was 84. It could have been an older photo. We'll give it that. Okay, so I'm just trying to gauge here exactly how this was working. I think in the comics, obviously, it all worked better when Tony was around during the time of Vietnam, and now it's an interesting thing with the comics how they're trying to keep the timeline with a lot of those elements so that they can have like the Captain America timeline and everything, but build it into this, which is a much, we're obviously just progressing much farther down the timeline here, and so by having all of these elements happening later, I think it stretches it a little bit. Maybe past the point of believability, but I don't know. I guess it could work.
Well, okay, so I need to jump back into comic lore here because this is another thing that doesn't get touched on at all in this movie so far in the lore of Tony and Dad. But again, as comics readers, I hope you guys can educate me. Howard Stark was not necessarily a good guy in the comics, right? I mean, my understanding was Tony's dad in the comics was an agent of Hydra.
I think depending on when you read it, perception of him has gone back and forth. So I think it may just depend on what run you're looking at.
And which Earth we're on. That's something that, as I've been getting back into comics, I'm realizing there are many different Earths, and it's a little confusing, and especially for me as I go through the different Marvel Wikia and Iron Man Wikia, trying to learn some of this stuff, and I'm like, oh, I'm looking up a character like Howard Stark, and here he is. Is it the Earth 616, or is it Earth 1610, or Earth 199, 999? It gets a little confusing when you try to
that Earth
try
was
to
on
pinpoint it. Yeah, but Earth 616, from what I've been going as I go through the Wikia, that seems to be the main Earth. And that's the one that all of this stuff happens in. I don't know enough about Howard Stark. He's not, I didn't do any digging on his character. So I'm going to have to learn more about who he is and everything. But the one thing that I did find interesting as I was reading about Howard Stark is it actually had this thing where it was about Arno Stark, which is his child with his wife Maria, and the adoption of Tony Stark, which was something that I found quite surprising. So apparently he and Maria had troubles having kids, and I don't know the whole story, but they used some alien technology to get pregnant, and that created a baby named Arno, who I think had some alien technology. And actually, I don't know what happened with Arnie. I think he hid Arno in a hospice. His wife had a foundation, and it was the Maria Stark Foundation Hospice, and they hid Arno in this foundation, and then they adopted a son that became Tony. And I just don't know enough about this, and if this is really the way things played out over time or what. So it's very interesting. And now I feel like I'm going to need to do some more digging into Iron Man and his history.
Yeah, I want to say that may have been an Elseworld story, but again, as much the fraction of comics that I know, even though I feel like I know a decent amount, but compared to a lot of the comics lorists out there, I don't know anything. So there could be an element of that I just missed.
Yeah, who knows? I'm very curious now. Regardless, it has piqued my curiosity, and I want to learn a little bit more about it. So now, what do you guys know about IntelliCrops? Did you guys look at IntelliCrops at all to figure out what they are? Because Tony so casually throws out that line.
I know, he's pretty excited about his IntelliCrops that they show up in this 1 minute sequence as a comeback to somebody challenging his ethical stance. Is IntelliCrops a thing that we need to be really concerned about?
Well, looking it up, I guess IntelliCrops, it's a thing that they're developing crops for food, feed, and industrial applications that grow on marginal land, whether it's like too saline, too dry, too polluted, or in areas who need peculiar growth factors. And so it sounds like, there's non-GMO. It sounds like IntelliCrops are full-on GMO. That's my impression.
That was kind of what I got out of it. Just genetically engineered to grow fast, to grow anywhere. And just, I think the implication was, we're feeding lots of people here with this military money. So get off my back.
Right, exactly.
Look how good we are with all our military money, said no one ever.
Now, there is an actual IntelliCrop company. It's IntelliCrop Genetica Vegetal, which is a Brazilian company. And that's also what they do. They are working to achieve the best in technology and genetics for soybeans.
I'm actually looking at them on LinkedIn, and you'll be pleased to know that it looks like they're hiring.
So there you go. If you want to head to Brazil and work in soybean genetics.
Well, if they need any stories written about the soybeans, I'll be happy to write them something. But I may not be of any use to them otherwise.
Well, and then we get to we have the wonderful cut again, and I think this is something that Jon Favreau, paired with his writers, paired with his screenwriter or his editors, work out really nicely. Is the way that they find to transition from scene to scene. We already talked about the great transition from Jeff Bridges as Obadiah on stage, saying if it's one thing about Tony, he's always working. And then you've got that fantastic smash cut to Tony throwing the dice on the crap table. It's just a brilliant cut. And here you have, I think, close to an equally brilliant cut where she's drilling him about all of the stuff that he does. And he says, do you ever lose an hour of sleep at night? I'm prepared to lose a few with you. And then we cut to them in the sack as she's kind of going a little crazy.
Well, and you can see her, and this is to the credit of Leslie Bibb's performance here. Like, you see her lose the argument in her eyes with what am I going to do next? You actually see it on her face as she comes to the awareness that of where she's going to end up in the next 45 minutes.
Yeah, that very brief, just instantaneous pause between when he says that and there's a quiet moment where you see her, and then we have the jump cut. That pause is I think where the gold is, because that builds up just the moment of tension, and then we flip over to this is the next thing. And I agree. I think the editing of that was just really well done.
Jon Favreau is a director who I don't feel like he's got a real strong visual stamp as far as what his films look like. Like, I don't feel like you could jump through each of them and just look at the shots and go, that's definitely a Jon Favreau film. And even in this film, and we talked about a few minutes ago, where he pulls a shot like a total homage to like Sam Raimi with the kind of the crash zoom on the missile. He really kind of seems to just be happy to use whatever works in context of what he's doing. But I do think that this is something he's really good at, is finding those little moments of humor and building it just the right way. I mean, I'd go all the way back to Swingers and the way that he wrote that. I just feel like he's got a good sense for those little moments of humor, and with the right editor, which he has here, I think that it just shines through.
Yeah, I agree. You definitely see that he has a sense of humor, and that he likes the pace to like be kind of snappy, at least for right here, and he's good at maintaining the energy of whatever he's trying to convey to you with the scene. The pacing's good. You could tell he's good with the fundamentals, and he knows how to pull out the right tool to make you feel what he wants to.
Well, exactly. And to that point, just the pace of the screen of the script, that every line, whether it's from Bibb in this case or from Downey, I can see myself in both of them. And as an audience member, that's what I want, right? I want that emotional connection with the scene. I want to be able to imagine myself having either side of this argument and winning. And it makes it feel so much more rewarding when we get to that cut. And they both won.
Dan Lebental is the editor on Iron Man, and it looks like he probably first met Jon Favreau back on Very Bad Things, which is a film that Favreau was in. He didn't direct it. That was Peter Berg directing it. But he ended up, this is the first time, they first worked together on Elf and Zathura. So both of his previous films, they worked together. And then Iron Man 2, they do after this, along with Cowboys and Aliens. And then he sticks with Marvel. He does Thor: The Dark World. He does the short All Hail the King, and Ant-Man and Spider-Man Homecoming, and Ant-Man and the Wasp. So he's around this franchise quite a bit.
Wow, nice.
And it's funny, I would argue that most of those have a lot of humor, and then there's Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah, that doesn't exist in this dojo.
I was going to say, he really sticks with the funny ones, and then there's Thor: The Dark World. But yeah.
But that's interesting, taking all of those on in kind of a list and looking at them together, because most of them do have a similar type of energy. There's a kinetic feel to them, and you don't feel like anything languishes. It keeps on at a good pace, but it also gives you what you need to have the emotions that you need to have. Yeah, the guy's a good editor.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull apart, speaking just strictly of the cutting and the humor, I'm trying to pull apart, some non-superhero stuff. And then Lebental did Chips, and that's sad.
Well, there's a lot of humor.
I guess. I guess there is, but you're right. And what a fantastic career! I mean, the guy has, he's been around long enough to really have a tone, and you can really feel it. Even in the spirit of Thor: The Dark World, which I think you could argue has some, it lacks a sense of joviality, but it certainly does offer us a chance to see some really flamboyant editing like we have in these other movies. And I think that, that speaks to his ability to use editing to tell the story. Big fan of his work in Homecoming too. And so, I'm excited. We've already talked about how great how great the editing works in Ant-Man and the Wasp, just being able to handle cutting around, changing size, and you can sort of feel the sort of narrative strokes coming from, all the way back here.
And when you say that, that is, of course, on our main show, The Next Reel, where we actually talked about Ant-Man and the Wasp on our Film Board episode.
Good times.
Indeed.
That's all I got.
I'm good here.
All right, guys. Well, that is it for this week's show. Ryan, thank you again for joining us today for this episode.
Oh, happy to be here.
Where can people find you? Where should you send them?
Ryan Dalton on Twitter, if you want to follow me there. I tweet about books. I also just tweet silly stuff sometimes. Legible Scrawl, if you want to hear me do a little bit of voice acting with some fun audio dramas. And then the Time Shift Trilogy is my series of time travel mysteries. And the first one is called The Year of Lightning, and they're available wherever books are sold.
Now who's that for? Is that who you're writing for? Is it a horror thing for adults only? Is it a kid's book? Who are you writing for?
They're young adult, but very much crossover young adult. I've had people as young as 9 and as old as 50 tell me that they enjoyed them. I just tried to put my nerdy love of nerdy things in the books, and you're following teenagers, but there's some nice little subtle nods to classic sci-fi if you're a sci-fi nerd, but it also approaches time travel in a way that I don't think I'd ever seen before. So if you want to see a unique way for time to be manipulated, then you might want to give it a shot.
I can't wait. Every day this week, I have come closer to pushing buy now, and I think by Friday, I think we'll make it happen.
We're going to get you.
I just need to be sold, man. Just maybe one more day.
No, I'm going to get you. Don't worry.
Oh, I love it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Of course, make sure you subscribe to the show for free over at marvelmovieminute.com. We have our chat rooms over on Discord where everybody jumps into the conversation. You should too. Head over to Discord and you can join us in our chats there. And of course, follow us over on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Next Reel. And of course, if you like what we do and you want to support us and get some cool stuff, why don't you become a patron over at patreon.com/thenextreel. Until next time, true believers.